Many of the greatest works of fiction ever have been banned. Mark Twain, Stephen King, Kurt Vonnegut, all rank among the most banned authors in America, and no one would ever argue any of them are short of great. 1984, To Kill a Mockingbird, Catch-22, The Catcher in the Rye, A Clockwork Orange, all have, over the years, been challenged and banned throughout different school districts, libraries, towns, etc. The Diary of Anne Frank, an autobiography about surviving the Holocaust, was banned repeatedly due to sexually explicit material, though it's hard not to raise an eyebrow when a book about anti-Semitism is banned so frequently. Hell, even the Holy Bible was banned in some parts of the United States. A little surprising, I think, due to violent material. Upton Sinclair's The Jungle, a book focused on the horrors of the meat packaging industry, was banned for spreading quote-unquote communist propaganda by illustrating the horrors of meat packaging industries in terms of sanitation and the horrible working conditions for the workers therein. The book is now seen as helping spur on reformation in that industry, with acts such as the Meat Inspection Act being credited in part due to Sinclair's studies and works. In the 90s and 2000s, it became part of the course for most popular books for kids to be banned or challenged, from Goosebumps to Harry Potter. But often, I never saw them being taken out of libraries, they were just challenged. Growing up, I knew that if a book was being banned by someone, it was probably a damn good book. But now it seems that book bans are more prevalent than ever, and worse, they seem to be successfully taking books off of shelves.
A small Michigan town is locked in a war over words. The battle is over these 5 books with LGBTQ themes.
These books and lifestyle choices are destructive and wrong.
Last month, a group called the Jamestown Conservatives led a successful drive to essentially defund the library. They want those books removed from the shelves. A recent study found more than 1,600 books were banned in more than 5,000 schools in 32 states. Jonathan Friedman of the free speech advocacy group PEN America.
What we've seen are citizens calling and filing criminal complaints about books available in libraries, and I've seen that in numerous states.
And if you think, oh, it's just books, who cares? Just keep listening, because these bans might affect you even if you've never read a word at all. As of the time of this being put out, it's Banned Book Week, and I want to share a personal message during this time about what I see to be a dangerous trend: the banning of media across all mediums under vague circumstances, usually by organizations that have never actually read or experienced the works they're talking about, and boil it down to a single buzzword as to why this book should not be allowed to be distributed. Banned Book Week comes every single year to draw attention to the various books being taken out of libraries, schools, and all that due to controversy. Because these books don't often have a loud voice championing them, unless it's some 50-year-old classic. A lot of the time, these books are taken out of schools without any fuss because no one even notices. And if they do notice, there's not enough people defending these books for them to have a chance.
Community standards in Jamestown are not the same as in New York, LA, or even in Grand Rapids.
Oh my gosh. And so I appreciate passion, I do. But it is a slippery slope. You cherish your freedom. What you're doing right now is taking other people's freedoms away.
They're taken off the shelves without opposition. And that's dangerous, because the books being banned aren't being treated as complete works. They're being treated as a singular trope. When Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret by Judy Blume came out in 1970, reactionary groups did not treat the books as a mature coming-of-age story that young girls could relate to on some level.
When that book came out, I was so naive, I think, that I didn't even know to be anxious over reviews.
Many books later and some 90 million copies sold in 32 languages, Blume and her publishers have done just fine.
Did you know there was a movie?
I heard that it's coming out.
So good.
But it began, she says, with a simple and, for so many readers, relatable feeling.
I was really writing it from what I remembered, from what I knew to be true.
Yeah.
I wanted to be normal. It's not that I wanted to be big or strong or anything else. I wanted to know that I was normal.
The book discussed young girls coming of age, and that meant wearing bras, their first periods, thinking about boys, and it was dismissed by certain reactionary groups as pure smut, as explicit material.
A more serious issue Blume is still dealing with, actions to ban books by her and others. According to the free speech advocacy group PEN America, several of Blume's books were banned last fall in school districts in Texas, Pennsylvania, Utah, and here in Florida. Her book, Forever, has been on the American Library Association's list of the 100 most frequently challenged books since 1990. It's a battle she's fought since the 1980s and the rise of the Christian right.
And it was pretty bad then, but nothing like what's going on now. There are people in power who want to control everything.
It also showed kids questioning religious order, which is a common trend you notice with a lot of these. Like Harry Potter was banned because it promoted witchcraft, apparently. Between 1970 and 2010, Are You There, God ranked among the American Library Association, also known as the ALA's, top 100 most frequently challenged books. The book was even banned in the elementary school that Judy Blume's own kids attended. Blume, however, argues that while book banning was bad in the 80s, it's even worse today, because Judy Blume is still alive, has worked in the publishing industry, and sees the trends that are happening. And it's worse now than it was in the height of the Satanic Panic.
And I hear there are groups around here, and they will say, this is what I think, this is what I've read, that we want to protect our children. We don't want them to read anything that isn't nice. We don't want them, everything should have a happy ending. We don't want them to think. We don't want them to ask questions. We just want their lives to be perfect. Well, that's not possible because lives are not perfect and kids have a lot going on and you can't control that.
Every year, the ALA puts out the list of the most banned books each year. While 2025 is still ongoing, we have last year's list, and it includes a lot of downright chilling statistics. In 2024, 4,190 individual books were targeted by pressure groups. Between 2001 and 2020, for comparison, these groups averaged 46 titles a year. 46 versus over 4,000. 55% of these challenges take place in public libraries. 38% take place in school libraries. It should be noted, challenged does not mean the books were successfully taken off the shelves. However, the massive increase is chilling. So who's banning these books? Well, 16% of book bans are initiated by parents. Just 16%. 4% are by patrons of libraries or stores. So, a tiny amount of people who actually read the books are initiating the bans. And only 1% are being done by librarians or teachers or staffs of any of these institutions. So who is banning these books and why? 36% of book bans are pushed by board or administrators of schools, often due to public pressure. 10% is done by elected officials or the government itself. And 26% is done entirely by pressure groups, organizations that congregate for the sake of banning topics from schools. And it should be noted that the previous two categories, elected officials and school boards, often consist of members of these pressure groups working through different systems to enact their agenda. In total, that's over 70% of book bans being pushed by individual groups with an agenda that are organized, increasingly so, organized over the internet. So what are these books that are being banned? The following are the most banned books in 2024. All Boys Aren't Blue, Genderqueer, a Memoir, The Bluest Eye, The Perks of Being a Wallflower, Tricks, Are You Noticing a Pattern Yet? Looking for Alaska, Me and Earl and the Dying Girl, Crank, Sold, and Flamer. I don't think you need a degree to determine there's a commonality between these accusations and challenges. So having seen all that, what are some trends we can notice? What are some topics and commonalities that we're picking up on? We often hear about these books impacting kids, but many of these books are aimed for a teenage audience. But they'll conflate a 17-year-old with an 8-year-old because it's easier that way. Some of these kids have already seen rated R movies and have experienced more explicit stuff online. All this feels like to me like a downgrade from when I was a kid. When I was a teenager, we were pushed controversial works and we were all the better for it. We've read books about media being used as a form of control that can blind us to fascist dictatorships and how the media can turn brother against brother in infighting to benefit the larger entities in charge of all of us. That if we fight amongst ourselves, we can't fight against the greater adversary. Nor are these books saying that young women should marry much, much older men who are pretty and sparkle, like in Twilight. No. Those are the books that my generation grew up with that were way more challenging, I think, to the status quo than any of the books we're talking about right now. According to the ALA, 92% of books being banned today are for sexually explicit material. Well, what does that mean? What does it mean to be explicit? Does it mean like smut? What's going on here? Well, it doesn't really mean much, actually, because Are You There, Goddess Me Margaret was challenged for explicit material, and that explicit material is girls talking about bras or having bodily functions. The Bluest Eyes is also called explicit, though Toni Morrison's deeply disturbing book is explicit because it features assault being committed by white people against black people.
That the people who do this thing, who practice racism, are bereft. There is something distorted about the psyche. It's a huge waste, and it's a corruption and a distortion. It's a profound neurosis that nobody examines for what it is. It feels crazy. It is crazy. And it has just as much of a deleterious effect on white people, and possibly equal as it does black people.
The bluest eyes in the title is in reference to the protagonist wishing she had blue eyes so she'd be more accepted by her white neighbors, deeming her black features as a form of ugliness. It's a book about internalized racism. It's used as a reoccurring discussion of these bigotries that people put upon themselves to the point where they self-destruct. The systemic bigotry internalizing these bad beliefs that hurt people. But in book bans, The Bluest Eye is often dismissed as a DEI book. It's strange how the books with the most complex themes are often boiled down to simple one-sentence buzzwords. DEI book. Explicit. Barely even a word. You don't even have to explain what the book's about. Just say it's woke, and that's enough to get it banned nowadays. Even though the book is discussing a complex series of problems and is written for a mature audience. The Bluest Eye is not a kid's book, yet it's grouped in with YA books. Why is that? For several years now, the most banned book in America is All Boys Aren't Blue by George M. Johnson, a memoir, not a novel, but a memoir, in which the author recounts being assaulted, of growing up in a world where they had to suppress their own identity, and how trauma shaped their worldview. Trauma including assault. Some really heavy topics there, but it's real. It's not fiction, it's not fake, it's real. It's much like the Diary of Anne Frank, recounting a real experience, and it's being banned. It's no coincidence that the majority of banned books also deal with LGBTQIA themes. Some challenges to the Diary of Anne Frank cite LGBTQIA themes as a reason why to ban it, in part because Anne Frank, in some instances, questions her own orientation. This is a private recounting of her own feelings in her own personal journal. It's a real historical document, but because that historical document challenges the beliefs of those challenging the book, they want to ban it. It seems baffling, doesn't it? And while it's not in the top 10, I'm reminded of a story I read about a few years ago where the graphic novel series Heartstoppers, one of the most popular graphic novels of the 2010s and early 2020s, was challenged in a Mississippi library. Because when reading how the book got banned, I see the entire insidious play to get these books off shelves in miniature. And I'm going to tell you all about it because I think this one story tells you how the process works. How it started was a complaint was filed by a woman named Heather McMurray, who complained the books were explicit and in the kids section. A meeting was held where only people who opposed the book were there. Those in favor of the ban showed up, and no one else knew it was happening. I should note that yes, public notices were issued that it was going to be a discussion, but how many of you actually know what public discussions are happening right now in your local library? I bet maybe 5 of you said you know. The rest of you have no clue. So even if they were a couple of flyers placed in your library in like the entranceway, do you actually look at those? Do you just walk right past them? It was in plain sight, but no one noticed because why would you look for it? Why would you assume to look at your library notifications waiting for someone to challenge a book? And so the books were taken away. Parents who went to the library regularly noticed the books were missing, and most of them, in virtue of their kids being left without a book they really liked, filed a complaint to put the books back on shelves. Journalists at the time quoted people who came to the meeting to get their opinions as to why they wanted to get this book off shelves so desperately. Many people at this meeting claimed it was against God's will, that Heartstoppers was against the will of God, and was being used to recruit kids into the gay lifestyle by presenting characters, I guess. Heather herself argued that the book Heartstoppers was essentially smut, explicit smut. Now, I've actually read Heartstoppers, and if you have read Heartstoppers, which, by the way, personal opinion here, it's not that good a book. It's whatever. It's a very whatever comic. I'm not a big fan of it. The book is not explicit. It's basically Hallmark for teens. The worst you get is they hold hands or kiss once. Hallmark is more smutty than this book. I think of all the quotes, though, it's this one that sells the whole game, in my opinion. Heather argued that the media was focused on Heartstoppers, but the real issue was the entire young adult section. All of it. That all books of a explicit nature should be removed from the kids section. Mind you, the books for older teens are counted as the kids section. It's very infantilizing, I guess, because of course a 4-year-old and a 16-year-old, they have the same reading material, right? By the way, she said sexually explicit. In this case, sexually explicit meant I guess spicy hand-holding, or, whatever, or blushing at each other. It shouldn't surprise you that most of these people who banned the book never even read the book. In fact, a majority of them hadn't even heard the book existed. Rather, they used databases to indicate what books should be banned and acted accordingly based on details given by these databases. Heather, in particular, cited a database called BookLook that told them that Heartstoppers was explicit. Never even read the book, but it was on a database, so therefore it must be true. By the way, BookLook also argued the novel The Hate U Give was another explicit book. The Hate U Give is a book about systemic racism and police brutality, and it was written at the height of the BLM movement. BookLook says that The Hate U Give contains inflammatory racial commentary, excessive profanity, and sexual activities. A book written about a teen grappling with racially motivated police shooting is inflammatory, apparently. Even though that was what was happening in the news at that time, and teens would want a book to articulate the concerns they might have had about their own community or even their own safety.
Basically, we don't want them to think. We don't want them to ask questions. We just want their lives to be perfect. Well, that's not possible, because lives are not perfect, and kids have a lot going on, and you can't control that.
You see what I mean here? Kids who read Heartstoppers discussed what the book meant to them. Many of them were violently bullied in school for maybe being gay or being outcasts, and a couple even said of being taken out of school because the bullying was just that intense. The book was their lifeline, a way of them feeling they weren't alien or weird. And now, those books are banned, so they have nothing else. At least, nothing to make them feel a sense of community within a community that already hates them. And if you're thinking, oh, it's just books, you're being dramatic, well, think again. Because the methods being used to ban books are being used to ban way more than just books. Earlier this year, the Australian organization Collective Shout noticed a game called No Mercy was available on itch.io and Steam. The organization claims to be a feminist organization, but also opposes women's bodily autonomy, meaning it's feminist in name only, and in functionality is a conservative movement. It frequently attacks diversity in the musical world, and also attacks explicit material that is being sold inside and outside of Australia. Among its many campaigns, Collective Shout tried to ban all X-rated movies from the country of Australia. They tried to ban extreme horror film, a Serbian film. They tried to ban dirty magazines from publication in Australia. Collective Shout tried to ban Eminem, Snoop Dogg, and Tyler the Creator from even being in Australia because they argued that their presence alone was enough to inspire violence against women. It seems odd that they were all rappers and they didn't seem to care about other people from other musical genres, less inspired by the black community, but That must just be a coincidence, I'm sure. Most notably, they tried to ban GTA 5 and Detroit Become Human, the latter of which was particularly bizarre because they tried to argue that it featured themes of child abuse and violence against women. The scene in question was meant to be disturbing, and yet they want to avoid that. You would think that an organization that supports women's rights wants to draw attention to the ways people can be cruelly hurt in a game that condemns such action, but apparently just depicting it is enough to be too much for Collective Shout.
Basically, we don't want them to think.
A game that shows the horrors that people can face in private is, according to Collective Shout, sexist and exploitative. Now, No Mercy is a game that is explicit, and it's probably something I would never personally play. I don't really care about this game as a game. However, Collective Shout contacted Visa and MasterCard as part of an initiative to punish the game distributors, to push them to no longer distribute No Mercy. And itch.io caved, and not only de-indexed No Mercy, but de-indexed any game deemed to be explicit in any fashion. This of course included all LGBTQIA games, as well as all furry games, all games with explicit violence, all games that were not distributed by a major publisher that might have pushed the boundaries even a little bit. This included all dating sims, it included all romance games, because they might have explicit content, we can't risk it. The list of games banned is extensive, to put it mildly, and the problem is that the guidelines are now so vague, and it conflates ideas that might not even be all that explicit with the worst, most explicit content. Consider this, in itch.io's current guidelines, No Mercy and Final Fantasy VII would both be challenged because they both contain non-consensual erotic imagery or concepts. In Final Fantasy, it's discussed. In No Mercy, it's shown. But to itch.io, there's no difference, because they both have a buzzword in common. Therefore, on their database, which looks purely at what buzzwords are associated and tagged on games, they are both equally dangerous. They don't look at the games on an individual case-by-case basis. That would be bad enough. It's just buzzword associated with it, therefore challenged. It's that simple, and that basic, and that superficial. Dead or Alive Volleyball would be seen in the same case as No Mercy, a game that's just about playing volleyball. Granted, it's a little dicey, but it's no worse than anything you'd see anywhere else. See, the problem is when you take art, which is a complex, multifaceted concept, and boil it down to stupid little buzzwords, everything can sound sexually explicit if you just phrase it the right way. Every single work, every single movie, every single book, every single show, every single everything can be deemed smut by a group wanting to ban it. They just gotta say one buzzword and that's it. It's just as absurd as saying the Bluest and Heartstoppers should be the same because they both have explicit content. Only in one, it's a graphic depiction of a violence and assault, and the other, it's spicy hand-holding. But when you boil it down to just one buzzword, they are identical to someone who is too indifferent to actually read either book and are just going down a list on a database online, looking for tags to challenge. And none of this is new. In 2022, Target.com removed a number of LGBTQIA books from its catalog, including several books from debut authors. After public pressure, Target did back down and reinstitute the books. By the way, none of these books are available in Target stores, it's just online. Their system caught that these descriptions of these books had certain keywords in common, and these keywords, when weighed against whether or not to be public outcry if they took them off the shelves, they took them off the shelves, because they figured, who's going to care? It's a debut author. No one cares what they have to say. And in case you were curious, this was done in some cases after pre-orders were opened up. So Target got your money and then didn't deliver the goods. These companies love to make money off of these complicated topics, but the moment they get a slight bit of pushback, they buckle. But the good news is, they buckle in either direction, in theory. Add to that public pressure campaigns, and the battlefield gets louder. Recently, Netflix has faced incredibly manufactured outrage against them when several old shows, including Dead End Paranormal Park, Umbrella Academy, Sense8, among many others, which, by the way, are done and have been done for years, were rediscovered by the right-wing outrage machine. And all of a sudden, Netflix was the worst, and they're mass canceling Netflix subscriptions over, a few shows that are no longer running, that were barely advertised when they first came out? That seems bizarre. I don't know personally how much I have to contribute to the conversation surrounding Dead End Paranormal Park as an entity on Netflix, because the entire discussion around it is absurd. It centers on a singular character from the show. Not the show as a whole, which is a horror show for kids, but the fact that the main character happens to be trans. It's a children's story about a haunted theme park. It's horror for kids, and if you ask the people who are mad about the show, who, by the way, didn't actually watch the show, watched a clip in isolation, they're upset because it's pushing an agenda on the kids, that it's explicit. See the pattern already? By the way, if you want a reminder of how artificial this all is, these people are angry that a cartoon exists, but are totally fine with cuties coming out on Netflix and still being on the platform. Yeah, cuties gets an okay, but the cartoon about a haunted theme park is just too controversial to stay on the platform. And before you say, oh, Cuties was a while ago, that's not relevant right now, well, it's more recent than some of the cartoons and shows they're getting mad about right now on the platform. The conversation around said show becomes centered on that buzzword rather than the show itself, as does every single work challenged by book bans, every single work challenged by Collective Shout, every single work taken off Target.com, every single work removed from libraries and stores and schools, because it's easier to discuss a buzzword than it is about the book itself, about the work itself. And of course, this comes in around the same time that Texas put into action SB 20, a state law criminalizing any material that features exploitative visuals of minors or people who look like minors, which on paper sounds reasonable. Like that's probably attacking CSAM or something, right? Except, no, it's not. In fact, people when reading the law realized how vaguely defined this topic was, and realized that, potentially, anime and manga, like say Dragon Ball, could fall under the parameters set by this law. And in fact, selling Dragon Ball could get you 20 years in prison.
Under this proposed law, if any image appears to show someone under 18 in a sexual way, it could be illegal. Now, supporters, including Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick, says this bill is about protecting children in the digital age, but the anime community is concerned, saying the bill's broad language could put innocent art and artists in legal jeopardy. Our Real One Belogan spoke to business owners who support protecting children, but worry the bill's vague language could target art that isn't meant to be obscene. Some business owners say they're already hearing from out-of-state artists who are concerned about doing business in Texas. Critics argue the bill doesn't define obscene clearly enough, opening the door for art to be misinterpreted. Anyone who possesses, shares, or creates these images could face criminal charges. The first offense could result in state jail, and people who repeat these crimes could face up to 20 years behind bars.
Some YouTubers like Rev Says Desu insisted that none of their favorite anime would be affected, that this wouldn't be a single factor, that people were trying to drum up drama.
Now, of course, this caused a ton of fear-mongering on social media. People are weaponizing this, they're politicizing it, and it's become a huge source of contention and toxicity. And the problem is, it's actually a giant nothing burger because Dexerto made a clickbait headline and they're trying to mislead you so they can get more traffic on their website. And I think it's very obvious. If you actually do the research on what's going on with this bill, you'll understand that it is not trying to criminalize the type of fictional content we're talking about here with anime, manga, and cartoons. And this is a very drastic misinterpretation of what's going on here, and it's causing a ton of misinformation and toxicity on Twitter. Yeah, who's surprised by that?
And then the law passed, and a store took Dragon Ball off their shelves to avoid pushing the line set by SB 20. The first of possibly many. And after that, I'm sure the next several will not be as publicly reported on as the first.
It's actually a giant nothing burger.
It didn't matter if the law actually targeted these things. The stores bent the knee to avoid having trouble. That's how a ban works at a state level, by the way. They don't actually have to enforce the law. Hell, SB 20 has not actually been used in any legal case thus far. But if a store is afraid of a law, they'll bend the knee before it ever gets that far, because they don't want to have to risk 20 years in prison over selling Dragon Ball. It's the same thing as the jungle being banned for communist propaganda when there was so much more going on with that work. It's just now we have a different word. It's not communist, it's DEI. Well, sometimes it's communist, who knows? But it's equally as meaningless and equally as impossible to apply to this given situation. It doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't matter what the work says or does or shows. Harry Potter was banned for being satanic. Is it satanic? No, but it's banned for that. These books are being challenged and banned for arbitrary, sometimes ridiculous reasons. That if you actually read the book or work with or engage with the work, you realize they're just nonsense. And I want to reiterate, you cannot be against Collective Shout taking your games off itch.io and before Netflix taking off these shows off of its platform. It's the same conflict, just a different perspective of it. You cannot excuse some bans and permit others. It's all or nothing. Because the moment you allow some bans to be unchallenged, you allow them to get a foothold and they'll keep going down the list in their database. So what do we do? I feel like some people feel completely helpless against the machine, but you're not. With Collective Shout's various campaigns against Visa, gamers en masse called Visa to protest their actions. This collective action against Collective Shout worked, because Collective Shout can only succeed if no one challenges them. And every foothold they get will be used to leverage further attacks on the art and culture. Take Texas, for example. No one challenged that bill, and now it's passed. And now stores are refusing to challenge the law in court because it's not worth the risk. The phrasing of these explicit materials, these bans, they're extremely vague because they can apply to anything. But they're also vague because once you challenge them, the whole argument falls apart because they have no argument. Not really, anyway. For evidence of this, consider the recent controversy involving late-night talk show host Jimmy Kimmel. He was taken off the air temporarily by Disney after pushback from both the government and local TV stations in response to some of his comments. The response by the audiences, however, pushed Disney back into bringing him back. This included vocal rejection of the decision, as well as monetary choices made. Unsubscribing from Disney Plus in bulk. Disney lost a lot of money in the stock market, and this motivated them to reverse course. While local stations refused to comply at first, eventually they did. This is an example of pushing back against censorship at a large level through both vocal protest as well as monetary decision-making. The problem is, most of these books, games, films, and media are not as popular as one of the biggest TV shows on television. If you want to support these works, support them. Buy banned books, watch challenge shows, go out and embrace the art with your wallet. Because companies listen to expenditure. Many of these bans were reversed because people heard about them and spoke with their wallets. Individual ban by individual ban. You can push back on this if you protest it and speak from the heart and support the artists who are putting their hearts and souls into complex, challenging works that get boiled down to a couple of buzzwords. Because after all, nothing is too explicit to sell if people are buying it.
If you can only be tall because somebody's on their knees, then you have a serious problem. And my feeling is white people have a very, very serious problem. And they should start thinking about what they can do about it. Take me out of it.
Then give white people some free advice.
They're all in my books.